Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahushai, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahushai, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahushai. Double honors to the apostles, bishops, and elders of GMS who rule well, who I learned this truth from, and salutations and blessings to you elect out there, starting with the 144,000. So this lesson is going into the 3.5 days, or the 42 months in the book of Revelations. Okay, so let's start in the book of Revelation 13 and 3. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death. Now this is dealing with the beast, and this head specifically is dealing with the Edomite rulership that was represented as the Romans. Okay, the pagan Roman Empire. And his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. Right? Now this happened primarily during the time of Septimius Severus. Although we know that there were Roman emperors, Israelite Roman emperors before him. Okay, you had the 12 original Edomite Caesars. All right, and after that you had Israelites starting to take over, but Septimius Severus plays a big role in that, being his name being Omen Nomen. And really this happened in 325 AD with the Council of Nicaea, with the Byzantine Empire establishing itself pretty much as a dominant power. Okay, so as you see, this says the Byzantine Empire, as the successor to the Eastern Roman Empire, came into power around 330, right? Which it's 325, 330. Okay, when you count from 335 325 to 330, you get 1325, 1330, right? And what happened during 1325, 1330 to 1350? You had the pneumonic and bubonic plagues, right? Known as the Black Death. Okay. So let's go back. And they worshipped, verse 4, and they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth, speaking great things and blasphemies. Great can mean great, greatly terrible, greatly bad. All right, great doesn't mean amazing or good. Okay, great can mean terrible, great things. Okay, it says, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. So this man came into power. He got up out of the state of captivity during the time of what we know as the Renaissance, which Renaissance means rebirth, which is another omen nomen, or nomen omen, which is nomen omen means name sign, right? Now, 42 months actually adds up to 3.5 years. So, which is another parabolic saying, which I'm going to get later in another chapter of Revelations. But I wanted to look up this word power and show also some information. It says
Strong's G 1849, exousia,
right, so power of choice, liberty of doing as one pleases, leave or permission, physical and mental power, the ability or strength with which one is endued, which he either possesses or exercises, the power of authority, influence, and of right privilege. Right, you had Edomites serving as serfs, as servants, as peasants in the Dark Ages. You had Edomites enrolled in armies, right? In the Israelite armies, and they rose up in ranks themselves. Okay, but it's not like one day they just popped up, right? Things happen in a succession of time, right? There's steps that have to take place. And when you go into history, you understand, the Edomites, they weren't just in the Caucasus Mountains. They were actually enslaved as well in the Arab world, right? They were a big part of the Ottoman Turks, which is the reason why Vlad Tepes uh, hated them with a pure hatred. He was fighting them. He's a hero over there in Romania, Transylvania, right? He's a hero, man, right? So Esau didn't have just one way. When Byzantium fell in, what was it, 1453, around there, those were Edomites, majority of them. You had Arabs, Ishmael, Jake among them, but a lot of those Turks, the Ottoman Turks, were Edomites. Okay, in the book of the 13 tribe by Arthur Koestler, he describes how filthy they were. They didn't bathe, pretty much just like the Khazars. Okay, the same spirit. It says, the power of rule or government, the power of him whose will and commands must be submitted to by others and obeyed. Right? So this man got the power of judicial decisions. Judicial goes back to law. Okay? So pretty much he got this power, right? A ruler, magistrate, you get the picture, right? The sign of regal authority, which that word regal means, let's look it up, right? A king, right? Something fit for a king. Regal. So he got this power, right? He came up out of his deadly wound was healed, and then he got this power to continue 42 months. So we have to understand, when did this 42 months come about, right? There's a significance of this 3.5 days also, right? Or 350 years. And this 350 years started from 1619, thereabout, 1619, 1620 to 1969, 1970. And I'm going to go into some history of why it was pretty much from that time period, right? So this is from chat. I asked it pretty much 1619, 20. Why is it so significant? It says 1619 to 20 marks the formal beginning of large-scale institutionalized, here they say, African slavery in English America. 1619, Virginia, a Dutch privateer ship, the White Line, brought 20 and odd enslaved Africans to Point Comfort, Virginia. This was the first recorded arrival of Africans in the English colonies. At first, their status was ambiguous, indentured versus enslaved, but it set the precedent. It says it set the precedent. Shift in labor. Up to then, English colonies relied on indentured Europeans. Africans brought in 1619 eventually became the core of a permanent hereditary labor system. 1620 expansion. Within a year, more Africans were sold to Virginia planters. The colony began codifying racial distinctions, laying the foundations for chattel slavery, which was in the curses of Deuteronomy 28. A yoke of iron, thou shalt be brought into Egypt again with ships, right? This is the beginning of the ball rolling, getting the ball rolling pretty much into what we know that primarily Judah went through. We know the other tribes suffered as well, but the main hell fell on Judah. Okay, so also let's go here. 1619 matters because it marks the pivot point where African slavery entered English America and slowly hardened into a racial hereditary system, right? And we know a lot of those, first of all, the Jamestown, Virginia. Jamestown was named after King James, okay, which was an Israelite, a Jacobite ruler. You had Israelites enslaving Israelites. We know that, You had Israelite kings, right, who were a part of the slave trade, and it wasn't, they didn't look at it like, oh, we're enslaving Israelites, or no, they just looked at it as a business, okay? And what happened in America was the furnace of affliction. It was the hell that Esau put on you, Jakes. Okay? August 1619, the privateer White Line arrived at Point Comfort, Virginia. It carried about 20 Africans taken from a Portuguese slaver. They were exchanged for food and supplies with English colonists. A second ship, the Treasurer, arrived soon after with more Africans. This was the first documented sale of Africans in an English colony that would become the United States. The context before 1619, Spain and Portugal had already been trafficking enslaved Africans to the Americas for over a century, right? So the slave trade was already happening. That's why you have to understand why 1619, right? 1619, 1620, that time. And why do you count also, brothers, right? Why do you count 1619? 350 is what? 1969. Why? What's the significance of 1969? Right? Esau going up into space, trying to go up into space. We know he didn't land on the moon, right? But he set his nest among the stars, saying he's like the Most High, right? Cultural revolutions, Esau's demise of his society, right? Veterans starting to come back, hooked on drugs, right? As I said, the cultural revolutions, women becoming more feminine, not feminine, Slakia, feminist, and becoming more shameless. Pretty much Esau losing that white picket fence, Mr. Rogers look, that wholesome Edomite family. His society started to fall. Drugs, a lot of drugs started to come in. Okay, the youth started to rebel. His shit started to fall apart, and mainly the truth started to come out via Abba Bivens, and then the men on down. That's as soon as he went up to the heavens, that's when the Most High started to bring you down, and he started to bring you down. As I said, he didn't just bring you down. It takes time. As you see, we're decades later. We're here in 2025 at the end of this man's kingdom. Okay. So pretty much, that was just a quick video on that. I just wanted to also go into 3 days, or 3 days. 3 days. Right? Revelation 11 and 9, and they of the people and kindred and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half. That's the same 42 months from that time period, 1619 all the way through. Because Jake was dead. Jake was in a dead state of mind, bugged out, and all nations seen it. Lost. Right? And shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves, and they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice over them, and make merry, and shall send gifts one to another, because these two prophets tormented them that dwelt on the earth. And after 3 days and a half, again 1969-70, okay, the spirit of life from the Most High entered into them, and they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them. Clear cut, simple. We're in that time period, right? And it started with our elders going back to their elders. I'm talking about Apostle Tahar's elders, the high priest Ariyah and Yahiquab and all those great men, starting with Abba Bivens. That's how the truth came out, and that's how great fear fell upon all these people, because they're like, yo, how did these how did these people just get this information? How did they wake up? It's impossible. So anyway, I hope you found that edifying. Shalom to the elect.